Do you know the differences between a triplex and a fourplex when it comes to rent control? You might be shocked to know that one wrong decision means you'll never cash flow a fourplex simply because you didn't do your homework and due diligence before the purchase. In this video, I've grouped together chapters 14 through 21 that I recorded a couple years ago in my free mini-series. In the next 15 minutes, you'll learn the definition of a duplex, triplex, and fourplex, the advantages and disadvantages of owning a single-family home as a rental property, how condominiums differ from homes with respect to their various rules and regulations. I'll go into the complexities of rent control because, as I said, you'll be very surprised there is a huge difference between triplexes and fourplexes. And then I'll tell you the pros and cons of furnished versus unfurnished rentals. Let's get right into it.
All right, smaller multifamily buildings. So what are we talking about here? Duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. A duplex has 2 units in it, a triplex has 3 units in it, and a fourplex, you guessed it, 4 units in it. One thing you see very often, at least in our city, is a lot of converted single-family houses, mainly in the duplexes and triplexes. And what do I mean? Well, there's a lot of older buildings with a lot of bedrooms, and some enterprising individual turned one of those rooms into a kitchen, another into a living room, and made a separate entrance, and boom, rented it out to 2 families. The issue, of course, is if that duplex is zoned correctly at the city, and if it's not, is it even allowed to be used as a duplex? If you bought it as a duplex and it's illegal, how does it affect your market value? You can have some purposely built duplexes and it's obvious because the builder chose to create 2 units at the same time. You might see both units with the same floor plan in an up and down configuration. Triplexes are similar to duplexes, but they might have that 3rd unit, tucked into the basement or maybe on a 3rd floor. One distinction with triplexes, at least in our city, and I encourage you to check with your regulations, a triplex needs to have special fire bylaw considerations. Specifically needs to have fire extinguishers in every suite, heat and smoke detectors, pull stations wired into an alarm panel. In Winnipeg, you also need a special converted residential dwelling license for buildings that are a triplex or larger. As of today's recording, that current annual licensing cost is $648. A fourplex is similar to a triplex other than the 4th unit, of course. It has all of the same fire boiler requirements, including the fire alarm systems, but where a fourplex is unique is that for rent control, again, in our city, it's subject to historical rent control. Okay, advantages and disadvantages of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Let's talk about the advantages. For smaller buildings, they're more affordable than an apartment block. It's kind of obvious, but a smaller purchase price than a big apartment block. So the barrier to entry, I guess, if you will, is lower. When one unit is empty, normally the other unit can also cover your holding costs. You have increased cash flow over a single-family home. Disadvantages, you have higher vacancy rates. Now, what I mean by that is it's a higher vacancy rate simply due to the fact that you have multiple families under the same roof that share walls, floors, and ceilings. What we found, at least in our management company, people simply don't stay as long in a duplex versus a single-family home. They consider it a home where, a duplex or triplex might be an apartment block. You've got zoning and bylaw regulations, so if you don't take extra care when purchasing, there can be a lot of surprises. With all multifamily dwellings, including apartment blocks, you have, well, unpleasant as or not, if there's cockroaches or bed bugs or really any kind of migrating pest, you run the risk of those pests spreading into the entire building, which costs you thousands of dollars. You also have increased operating expenses. I mentioned the converted residential dwelling license and other bylaw requirements. Just the $650 dwelling license, the fire bylaw, the extra heating inspection, that could cost you over $1,200 a year. That's over $100 per month of cash flow gone simply because you own a triplex or larger. It's the same cost really as owning a large apartment block. And that'll do it for this episode. So, single-family homes, or SFH, arguably one of the most popular rental investments of all time, hands down. When you're speaking with friends and family, it seems like everyone knows someone who either owns a rental house or who owns a rental property themselves. So when I refer to single-family homes during this segment, I'm going to include all of the dwellings that house a single tenant, including townhouses, single attached homes like side-by-side, and of course detached standalone houses. Condos are similar to a single dwelling in that you're only renting to one group on a single lease, but I'm going to be covering condos in a separate segment. There's a lot of info there. So single-family homes come in all shapes and sizes, literally. You can have a 1-bedroom home in a low-income area to a 5-bedroom luxury executive rental in the nicest neighborhood in town. Single-family homes are also very popular with what some people call the accidental landlord category. These are people that might find themselves trying to rent out a home because it didn't sell on the MLS, or perhaps they have real estate that was gifted to them, or maybe an estate from a deceased family member. Regardless of how you come to own a single-family rental property, it does come with its own advantages and disadvantages. In keeping with the spirit of our rental series here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video. Okay, so what are some of the advantages of owning a single-family rental home? Well, number one, they're fairly easy to obtain. The barrier to entry is quite low. Some people might even retain their existing starter home as a rental and move into a bigger home. Number two, financing rates are very good, as most investors would qualify for residential mortgage rates. Exit strategies are slightly easier than other types of investments. So what do we mean by an exit strategy? Well, selling is an exit strategy, but with single-family homes, you actually have a larger market. You can sell to an existing investor, no different when you're selling any of the other previously mentioned asset types, commercial, apartment blocks, small multifamily, but you also have another type of buyer, the first-time home buyer. That means if you want, you can take that single-family home, perform a decent renovation on it, and get maximum value by selling to a first-time home buyer, where in most markets, you have the potential of multiple offers, bidding wars, and people paying more than list price. Another advantage, smaller repair bills. If you recall a few episodes ago, I said that an apartment block only has one roof and one boiler, but that's a $70,000 roof and a $60,000 boiler. In a single family home, you can take at least a zero off of those prices, meaning a $7,000 roof or a $6,000 boiler. Another advantage, usually the tenants pay all of the utilities and they take care of their own grass cutting and snow removal. The tenants tend to stay a lot longer. I've mentioned this before, but there are no neighbors to share a floor or a ceiling to argue about noise complaints. Most people consider the house a home. They fill the basement with their trinkets, their kids go to schools in the neighborhood, and you get a lot more lease renewals. Now, disadvantages, it's only one unit. When it's empty, you have zero income coming in. All things being equal, there's less cash flow compared to multifamily dwellings. You need to purchase multiple single-family homes, which could be more money per door compared to an apartment block. However, then one might be able to argue that this negates the only disadvantages I mentioned, because if one house is vacant, the others in your portfolio spread out the risk and the holding costs. And if you own multiple homes, your cash flow increases accordingly. So that's about it. Next segment. So, condominiums. It's a single dwelling. Why do we need to devote an entire segment to this type of asset? Well, the definition, a condominium is a large property complex divided into individual units and sold. Furthermore, ownership usually includes a non-exclusive interest in certain community property controlled by the condo management. Condo management is usually made up of a board of unit owners who see to the day-to-day operations of the complex, such as lawn maintenance and snow removal. Most people might think of a residential high-rise, but you could have townhouse condos. I've also seen single-family home dwellings in a 55-plus community as part of a condo association. So here are some basic concepts as I understand it. The condo owner owns the airspace inside of their condo, sharing an ownership interest in the community property, such as the floors, walls, sidewalks, stairwells, and exterior areas. A general requirement of a condo owner is monthly payments for the common element fees, or more commonly known as condo fees. The rules of the condo, as set out by the Condominium Act, are outlined by two main documents, the bylaws and the declaration. The declaration defines the units and the common elements of the corp and specifies the boundaries of each of them, and the bylaws deal with the governance of the condo, or put another way, how they are run. And this point's important. Bylaws may be passed, repealed, or even amended by the board of directors. There's a third document called the rules, which are obviously, rules. And they can be things like parking restrictions, pet policies, smoking policies. So in the next segment, I'm going to be discussing the advantages and disadvantages. In the context of having rental property that's a condo, let's state the advantages and disadvantages. So advantages. Often condos are less expensive than a single-family home, but can often command the same amount of rental income. Maintenance of the exterior of the building is the responsibility of the condo corp. Because the condo owner is only responsible for the airspace inside their condo unit, another advantage is that the condo owner's insurance policy is significantly cheaper. Sometimes there's also great benefits like heated underground parking, swimming pools, fitness centers, common party areas that come with the condo for the use of its residents. Let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum and then talk about some of the disadvantages. On my last point, there's more amenities offered by the condo, but that comes with higher common element fees. Now, the condo fee cannot be paid by the tenant, so guess what? That monthly condo fee, which could be significant, eats right into your valuable cash flow. Depending on the condo, I've seen fees in the neighborhood of $200, but as high as $600 or $800. Another disadvantage when purchasing a condo, you're often at the mercy of the property management company or the self-managed board of directors that manages the building. I'm referring specifically to the reserve fund, which is a pool of money that belongs to the condo corp to pay for large capital expenses. So if a major item needs to be fixed, you need to come up with the money to pay your share of the common repairs. So let's talk also about liens. In most condos, it's written into their bylaws that if an owner doesn't pay their fees on time, the condo corp has a right to put a lien on the condo by a certain deadline. If that happens, you could lose the condo. Rental levies. This is becoming more and more common with condos. A rental levy is the amount an owner must pay if they are going to be renting out their dwelling. You also have disagreements with the condo board versus the Residential Tenancies Act. What I'm referring here is when the condo board decides something such as ordering you to evict your tenant, but you're bound by the rules of your governing body and their Residential Tenancies Act. I mentioned in my intro that the board has the ability to change rules, and this is critical. Basically, a board can change the entire purpose of your condo. The last disadvantage I'm going to speak about is very market dependent. I'm referring to the sale or disposition of the condo. I'm only speaking from experience in our current market, and I sincerely hope this changes, but in Winnipeg right now we have an extremely hot housing market, a shortage of house listings, and many homes going for tens of thousands of dollars above list, but in the exact same market it's very, very difficult to sell a condo. Condo rentals can be very lucrative, and believe me, we manage hundreds of condos for individual condo owners, but make sure you do your homework. So when deciding to purchase a small multifamily rental property, I just wanted to point out a critical difference. Now I'll preface this segment by saying this information is specific to the Winnipeg market, so if you're watching this and wanting to purchase property in another region, just verify your information. 3 units and 4 units. You would think 4 units is better because it has more cash flow for just a little bit more in the purchase price. Well, in Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba, there's a huge difference, and I'm referring specifically to rent control. The province considers a triplex in the same rent control class as a single-family home, but a fourplex is in the same class as an apartment block. So what does that mean? Well, in a building with 3 units or less, anytime the tenant moves out, you're allowed to set the rent to, well, whatever you want, which would be the current market value. In a fourplex building and larger, you can only charge which was previously registered at the RTB. This means that if rent was registered in 2005 at $650, it was only allowed to be increased by 1% to 2% for the past 16 years. That's only an increase of about $150. So let's say your long-term tenant's paying $800 in rent and doesn't renew their lease. The 2-bedroom triplex next to yours, similar unit, is currently renting for $1,100. So let's increase the rent and get more cash flow. But you're stuck. You can't charge more than the original $800. And if you go against the RTB and charge market rent and they catch you, and they will, you'll be forced to pay back every dollar of that rent that was illegally increased and collected. Now, there are ways to increase the rent, which I'll cover in a future segment. And this distinction doesn't really apply to newer buildings, but I just wanted to make you aware that there's a very firm line between a 3-plex and a 4-plex. You just need to consider these factors when choosing what type of rental property you want to purchase. My goal here is to provide you with enough information so you can make an informed decision and when it comes time to looking for that perfect rental property. So ask yourself, is it worth it to purchase a 4-plex if it takes you into the same class and regulations as a large apartment block, or stick with a triplex instead? Commercial property, vacation or short-term rentals, apartment blocks, smaller multifamily, single-family homes, condominiums. It's important to know why you want to purchase that particular asset class. You want to evaluate all of the factors and make a choice that is right for you. In this segment, I'm going to be discussing furnished versus unfurnished rentals. In continuing our education and choosing the right type of rental property, the cash flow of that rental property, I thought I should speak about furnishing your property or renting it out vacant. Why am I discussing this now? Well, as I've said before, you want to evaluate a property before you make an offer, and you want to purchase it based on a lot of factors, but cash flow is definitely something to keep in mind. All right, so let's discuss the advantages and disadvantages. The advantages, higher rents. A furnished property, all things being equal, generally commands more in rent, so there's a check mark on the plus side of your chart. And I should clarify, I'm not talking about short-term and vacation rentals. More money and cash flow versus renting it out unfurnished. There's really nothing wrong with that, but let's examine the other side of the coin. Let's discuss the disadvantages. You have out-of-pocket costs. You have to buy the furniture. Unless, of course, you're going to be living in your home and you're moving and maybe you want to leave behind your old furniture, but you still might have to purchase some pieces. The length of time to find a renter. If you think about the pool of available renters, the majority of renters have their own furniture, so they're looking for a property that's unfurnished. So who is looking for a furnished rental? Well, we have tenants that are here from out of province, those wanting to find something temporary before they move their family and their belongings. You could also have someone that's starting out for the first time, maybe a young renter or a student. You could also have someone that's newly separated and wanting to start over. My point, the pool of available tenants is a lot smaller for furnished rentals compared to unfurnished rentals. And while you think you can charge more in rent, you could have increased vacancy periods while waiting for the right tenant to come along. The tenant looking for a furnished property might also be a short-term renter. Maybe they only want the place for a few months and then they're buying a home, or they're posted here for 6 months by their company and then they're moving back home. So as I've said in the past few episodes, know your numbers, okay? If you're wanting to rent out something furnished, great. If you're doing so, be purposeful about why you're choosing that model. And that'll do it.
If you want to know more about how to own a rental property and manage it yourself, I'm releasing 2 to 3 new videos per week. Subscribe to this channel to get notified when they're posted and also to help grow the channel so YouTube will put this information in front of other landlords and people like yourself. And if you're interested in checking out a community of like-minded investors that have come together to share ideas and experiences about self-managing their own rentals and being a landlord, check out my Rent It Yourself community. Link is in the description below, and thanks for watching.